Hello everybody, and it's time to set up another new shrimp tank. And I want to show you guys how I set this one up. In this video, I want to focus just how easy it is to set up a Neocaridina shrimp tank. A lot of people think way too much and way too hard about it, but it really is so easy, super easy. So I'm going to show you just how easy setting up a new Neocaridina shrimp tank can be. So first off, this tank is living on the top shelf of my rack. So I'm standing on a ladder. So let's take a look at this. In my last video, I showed how I took a simple, basic, cheap Aqueon Quiet Flow 20 filter and modified it to make it shrimp safe. And the light we are using on this one is, I actually did a light review on this tank here for a Hygger light, and I still use my own discount code and got this one for 50% off. And I think that's going to be a lot of pretty good light for a 20-gallon long, because the LEDs are the same strength as they are in that 40, but I mean, we're only like a foot tall here, and there we're over a foot and a half tall. So now I've showed you the tank and the filter. We've got that back side painted and that side painted, and I didn't want to stack them all in here like this, like I did on this level. I want to have a little bit of space here on this top shelf to store stuff and to be able to get a better look at the tank like this. So we've showed the filter, the tank, and the light. The first thing we need to do, we got to worry about sand. Now when it comes to Neos, you basically just want inert sand or gravel, just your basic sand or gravel. You don't want any of the fancy shrimp stuff, because that will change your parameters. Some people like it for plants, but I've never found it really necessary. Now, something that you do need to keep in mind is when I'm picking a substrate for a Neocaridina shrimp tank, it is based on what substrate color that particular shrimp is going to look good the best at. So, and I find other than a few, most shrimp look best on black. And this line, the line we're going to be putting in here, is a very special line. It's a line I am working on creating myself. So this will be a breeding project tank. So let's get started. First thing I want to do is rinse all the sand. I've showed you guys how to do that before, but essentially just rinse until the sand is clean. When we come back, we'll be putting sand in here. Nothing special here except for dumping rinsed sand into the tank. Rinse it outside in a 5-gallon bucket with the hose. And then we spread it out nice and even. Didn't put very much sand in here because this is a project tank, and this tank will be getting reset over and over again. Alright, there you have it. The tank, the filter, the light, and the sand. We're almost there already. That's crazy. Alright, so I always like showing this. It's one of my favorite things to do. We're going to make a moss carpet in the back of this tank, and we're going to leave the front of the tank open. And I always get a lot of people asking me, how much moss do I need to do a moss carpet? Well, for what we're about to do here, I have what I would, if you buy a moss on my website, markshellyaquatics.com, this is about three portions of moss. So what we're going to do here is we're going to break it into little tiny bits, like so. Get it all nice and fluffed out. Sometimes in shipping they get kind of compacted like that, and you'll be like, I didn't get hardly anything. And then you go like this, like, oh, that's more like it. So I'm gonna make a bunch of little tiny. Might not need all this moss. We'll see. I'm gonna try to do a good job of packing it in there nice and tight. Let's see what we can come up with. So the trick to making these moss carpets and getting your moss to go the furthest is the smaller the strands you can get and the closer you can get them together. So that not only helps your moss go further, it'll help it spread and grow faster. If each little, but it's just a matter of how much time you want to put into it. If you did one little strand of moss at a time, that would maximize it. But I think picking out these little tiny bits does a pretty good job. So now this moss, it won't grow roots or anything. You're just anchoring the moss into the substrate so it don't float off. And then eventually it'll all grow together and form one giant mat, and it'll look just like a carpet. And so here you can see what we got as far as the moss carpet goes. And so now we're to add water, but first what we're going to add is safe. People always ask me, what do you use to condition your water? What do you add to your water? I, in my Neocaridina shrimp tanks, just use my tap water and a good dose of safe. In goes the safe. And now let's fill her up. Alright, we're just now filled up. Just plugged in the filter. And now it's running. So when you're doing a new shrimp tank, everything we've done so far is just putting sand in, putting in the plants, and plugging it in. So now this is the part where if you're new and you don't understand how new shrimp tanks work at the very beginning, this is the part you really need to pay attention to. Here, this is the important part I was talking about. This is established filter media, a dirty sponge, if you will. And we are going to squeeze out the goodness from the existing healthy tank doing awesome into here. So we transfer over just a little bit of the cycle into this new tank. I'll explain more here in a minute. So one of the big questions I get all the time repeatedly is, how long do I need to let my new tank I just set up run before I add shrimp? Well, the answer is it depends. It depends a lot. Let me explain. So if you're setting up your very first tank and you have no established healthy tanks and you can't do a filter squeeze or whatever, you may be looking at 2 or 3 months actually before you can add shrimp. There is no set time. I mean, what you really need is a test kit, and you need to add an ammonia source. Back in the day, what I used to do, I used to add a handful of snails into a tank and feed lightly. And then you test for ammonia and nitrites. Then you quit getting ammonia and nitrites and you start getting nitrates, then you know your tank is cycled and you can add some shrimp. Now, when I do things this way, and I have a big healthy squeeze of filter gunk from a healthy established tank like this, I'm going to be putting shrimp in here in a couple hours. Now let me explain why. Now this tank is not fully cycled, but we added a whole bunch of plants here, and as long as we're careful and only have a handful of shrimp in here for the first month or so and feed very, very lightly, the tank will cycle itself quickly, because when this moss grows, it's going to use up ammonia and nitrites and nitrates over time. And I'm only going to be feeding very, very little, and there's only going to be a handful of shrimp, and shrimp don't make too much bioload. So then the tank can grow into itself. The bacteria colonies in the filter can establish themselves. We've already seeded them. And so adding a little bit of shrimp and feeding really, really light for a month, that'll get it cycled in. All right, and now the best part of this is adding the shrimp. Let's add these shrimpies. Come on, shrimps. Ooh. Get them all? Oh, there's still a couple in there. Come on, guys. All right. You're not making a very good video, shrimps. All right, we got them all out. That was eventful. And you can see what we got here. There's a female. These are the beginning stages of a line I have created myself. Super excited about them. I don't know how they'll look in here, but they're just the beginning stages of my new project. Let me focus. Look at them. I was not expecting buried females yet in this project, so that's why I started this tank. That's a good one. That's a good boy. The males look pretty good so far. So the good buried females went here, and the best males. And I'm going to try taking the project to the next level. But I really, really like this group of genetics with these genetics. And if I go any further with what I'm trying to do, I'm afraid I might make it not as good as these. So I wanted to save this group of genetics, and see what we got. So that's what this tank is doing. So with all these buried girls in here, we should have quite a few shrimp in here pretty soon. These guys have been buried for about a week or two. I'd like to get pictures of them, but they won't stop moving. All right, everybody. There's the new shrimp tank. Fully set up. And late morning, early afternoon, all done. Easy peasy, of course. Building the filter was yesterday. Painting the tank was yesterday. But when it's all ready to go, actually setting up the tank was not too hard. Thank you guys for watching. Bye.